Hi, I'm Patric Palm, CEO and founder of Favro, and this is the Learn from Leaders podcast. The background to these interviews is that Favro clients are some of the most innovative and agile businesses out there. And it's used for collaborative planning by marketing teams, by product teams, HR, management teams. And what this means is that we get to know some truly inspiring people. So what we do in this podcast is that I invite them here for a conversation about something where they are true leaders, so we can all learn from it. Let's go. All right, so we are live with Adrian at Wolt for the Learning from Leaders podcast. Super happy to have you here. You are in Finland right now, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool, and I'm Swedish, but I'm in Lithuania right now. So why don't we just jump straight into it? What's your kind of story, leading up to being head of IT at Wolt? Obviously being a very exciting company, very fast growing. But I guess it wasn't your first job.
No, absolutely not. And I think it's quite of an interesting story, especially because I am originally from Switzerland. Started there as a software developer. My background is even in software development, and then came to Finland and basically just needed a job in Finland, leading me to working for one of the big consulting companies back in Finland when I came here. And at that point, I realized, hey, to make actually a difference in technology, it's very hard to make that difference when you're a consultant, especially in more traditional companies like financial companies. You have to go inside that company to make the difference. And that then led me to Nordea, where I was leading the digital workplace team. Inside Nordea, made the cloud transaction regarding the digital workplace, basically Office 365 in the Nordea case. And then it brought me to the demand to see what's next in IT. And basically that's when Wolt discovered me and I discovered Wolt. And I figured out that in Wolt there is this unique opportunity of building the IT of the future. I mean, Wolt is a very young company, super rapidly growing, or people may call it in a hyper-growth phase, which means we see growth rates of 3 to 5% per week. And that in combination with no on-premise infrastructure, no servers on-premise, basically only cloud, was just a unique opportunity to build the IT of the future, and that brought me to Wolt.
I think that's a great segue to my next question, because I know about your background at Nordea before, and I think we're all a little bit prejudiced about the banks and IT, right? And it's probably a very interesting challenge to handle IT at the big bank, but I would dare to argue that it's probably quite different from where you're now. And how would you describe let's say, well, if you would kind of break down the main differences, being in your role in a company like Wolt, which is cloud native, compared to being at an enterprise that have quite a lot of legacy systems. What does it really mean for the role of IT?
I think the main difference is that you don't have to plan to be backward compatible. I mean, if you take financial companies, not only Nordea, but they have a lot of systems which have been established over a long time. And those systems are there for a very good reason. And normally it's too costly to just get away from those systems. Hence, that you need to be somehow compatible. You have to integrate those systems into your future landscape. In addition, you have a lot of external influences, like financial companies have a lot of systemic relevance, or at least relevance. We see it currently with the political situation that they might have to apply sanctions very fast. and therefore they're much heavier regulated and have to introduce controls all over the place very, very rapidly, where a company like Wolt may not be under that heavy regulations and therefore has a bit more flexibility and can elaborate and test and then roll new technology much faster. That means in a company like Wolt, it's more exploring and then from going from that exploration phase to make it in a professional operation. And in a bank, you normally take things which is already known on the market and you just like integrate it into the legacy technology. That means I see Wolt and my work here is more like front running technology, where in traditional companies you may actually use the existing stack of technology efficiently.
Would you say, with that in mind, that that it can, at a company like Wolt, be that IT can have a more strategic role, that you can kind of, let's say, lead with IT versus, taking what you were just saying about, how you need to constantly think about, regulations and the legacy stack that you have, that maybe you would feel like you're always a little bit in defensive mode, so to say, versus because I always find it interesting, when is IT strategic and when is it not? So would you say that this means that IT can be a bit more strategic in a cloud native company like this?
It's a tricky question because I in general I think IT is a support function in all kinds of companies. I mean normally IT is not the business if you're not Apple or Microsoft or Google. But it's also an enabler for a lot of things. That means in the modern world, I mean now with the COVID situation and so on, IT was a big enabler to allow people work from anywhere. It's a necessity to have IT, to have it efficiently. If that's a strategic role, I see IT always as a tax. Because you need IT to basically keep your things operational, but is it really your company strategy? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because over all the years, both with this company, and previous companies I've run, I would say that you're one of the most let's say modern thinkers in terms of heads of IT I met. You're I mean, since I have a slight insight into how you operate, I mean you're very progressive. I mean, I think in a lot of organizations, the line managers, they feel like IT is more of kind of like a stopping block. It's an impediment for them to do what they want to do. Versus, I think in your case, you've been very successful with really making it rather an impediment, remover. But it's interesting that you put it in those words, because if we think about analysts like, for example, Gartner, very often, since their audience are IT professionals, they very often like to try to promote, the more strategic dimension of IT. So with that in mind, then there was something you said there. You mentioned kind of working from anywhere, and so I'm guessing that in your situation you do have people working from a lot of geographies and many time zones and office or not offices. Is that correct description of your organization today?
Absolutely. I mean, we have people working from 23 countries and all the cities where we are operating in. That means already by our business, we have people working from anywhere. And we have to secure as an IT, basically, we have to enable those people to work from anywhere, to onboard them rapidly. And then also to be capable of doing that in a reliable and secure manner. And I think that was really one of the initial challenges I had starting in my current job, which I might even have underestimated. How do you actually globally onboard people, just like providing them equipment in a secure way, without having people on site? And that has to happen rapidly. I mean, we have moments when we had to onboard people in 1 or 2 days. and we had to figure out how we deliver securely equipment to those employees.
Yeah. So if we continue a little bit on that topic, so if you have an organization which is working from anywhere, well, first I have to ask you something else. Was this a trend that happened for you already before COVID, and COVID maybe just accelerated it, or was COVID kind of like a big game changer for you when you had to adapt to this change?
No, I think COVID as such was basically not really making that much of a difference regarding this. I mean, we enabled already before people to work from anywhere. It has also to do that if we think about traditional companies, they always consider their office network as a secure zone, and this kind of setups where in Wolt we never even had the term of an office network. It's just availability of the internet connection for employees, where security of that network is not that relevant, because if people work with their laptops then remotely or from wherever, we have still to secure those devices, and that shows a bit that we never had that mindset of like being bound to locations.
Yeah. So I guess then that you were pretty good at this already before COVID, but for the ones listening now, I think for many of them, COVID was probably an accelerator or even a kind of the disruptive event. How would you characterize the difference between a working from anywhere organization and let's say a little bit more traditional organization? There was a few things you said already, but if you would really kind of try to do kind of a clear description of what is like the role of IT in the kind of working from anywhere organization compared to a more traditional one.
I think the role of IT is at the end everywhere we're the same, but IT may gonna perceive itself a bit different in those kind of organizations. Nevertheless, I think based on COVID, all the ITs have changed up until now to basically support that work from anywhere. I think it's more a benefit, or let's say it this way: if you want to have an organization that is fit for the future, if you enable working from anywhere, you're simply more flexible. You get access to, a global talent pool where your competitors who work in one location are very limited to the talents in one specific location. Mm-hmm. And that means I see it as a big enabler for the growth of our business, for the growth of our company, having the working from anywhere enabled.
So how do you, if you're speaking with colleagues at other companies, what's your feel around, what you're doing, quite a bit different? I mean, maybe this might actually be a blind spot for you because you take it for granted since you're already doing it well and you've done it for a while. But if we just try to, because I think, I mean, if we're going to be honest here, I think a lot of IT organizations and a lot of heads of IT, would like to be in the place where you are, and for them it's a catch up, it's a race towards that, and so I think, I mean, I can also say just from my limited just first-hand experience interacting with your organization that you are doing things a little bit different and way more modern than many other organizations. But from your point of view, how would you say that this I'm going to stick to the role of IT because it's also like a relationship, right? It's like, what's the relationship between you and the teams?
I think one of the things which might be different between us and many traditional companies, we normally go for the future. We set the future as the default, and then we figure out how we integrate legacy things into it. And one very simple example we have in Wolt is when we introduced Chrome OS, It's basically very super simple devices to manage, super simple for IT. And the way how we did it is, instead of like doing this classical traditional projects, just like planning everything for a long time and then at some time maybe roll it out, we figured out where can we start in the organization. We tested it with new joiners, and then we realized, okay, that works. And we made it the default for all new joiners for a specific job role in the organization, and then started to just like let it grow from there. And that enabled us to, by having the new joiners, there was a very small hurdle to get them on board. And on the same time, we could then spread the message through the organization that this change is happening. And having it then as default suddenly allowed us to overcome some issues we had with traditional devices in the organization. That means we try always to understand what is the future. And the future is not that difficult in IT. I mean, there are the big IT companies like Microsoft, like Google, like Apple. They tell us what the future is. I mean, we cannot change how the devices look like, from how the operating systems are. We can maybe influence them a little bit, but they give us the roadmap. And watching them carefully, seeing where they are heading, allows us to then make the right decision for IT without even think too much about strategy, because it's just watching what those companies do and very well understanding what are their incentives. Like Microsoft has business to business, Google has advertisement, and Apple is selling emotions. That's super important to know what they want to do and what they are going for.
So do you, many would argue that we've been going from a situation where, the office is the kind of the central hub for, where work is done, to that we are now, we kind of, working from anywhere organizations in a place where, the main hub where work is being done is online. And when we actually meet each other, that's for the other things. That's like for building relationships, for, some of the social parts of work. But it's actually almost like the secondary, workplace, so to say. Online is like the primary workplace now. Well, firstly, would you agree with that statement? And secondly, how does that change, how to work with IT? Does it simply mean that you would invest more money into hardware and software, or what other kind of implications do you see from that?
I think the first part of it, I personally, I love to go to the office when I have no meetings or very limited meetings in the calendars. We have this no meeting Wednesdays, and that's normally when I go to the office, because then you actually have time to talk to people, to get like this floor talks, to just get a little bit the pulse of what's going on in the company, and interact with human beings, which is also very nice. I mean, human beings in the real and not just in an online meeting. Then the work, as you mentioned, the work gets mainly done somewhere online. And from an IT perspective, it basically means that the IT equipment has to work, it has to be reliable, and then it obviously has to be secure, but it needs also to be available fast, especially when you onboard new people. And context may become more and more relevant. That means I think people are still used to work from laptops, traditional companies, where in modern companies, people are working much more from phones, from all kind of devices. And I think what we were going to see next is that basically information systems will deliver the information based on context, based on, are you outside? I mean, you might not going to need the same granularity on a document when you're outside, like walking or doing something, or in a subway or in a plane, than when you are in the office reading. And I think that's maybe the next big thing we were going to see, that context, where people are, what they do will be taken into account when information is presented to them. And I think, again, IT is just the enabler of this, basically, making sure that the context is available to those applications who can then create the value for the individual out of it.
It was what you said there in the beginning. I might quote you on that. You said, "I go to the office the days when I don't have meetings in my calendar." That's awesome. That you basically summarized, the whole, like, the benefits of working from anywhere, but still kind of having an office. You summarize that in one statement. So we might actually make that the favorite tagline. Okay, cool. So how does it? How would you say that? Let's say buying behaviors have changed. If we go back far in time, a lot of IT was was purchased in a central way, and there was it was a big implementation project typically acquired as well from the vendor or from a consultant, and I guess that works quite different now, right? How would you say that kind of the whole purchasing and implementation behavior, so to say, have changed when you have the kind of role of IT as you have been describing so far?
I think that's again a very multi-sided question, because first of all, what we do is as we want to enable our business to explore, to elaborate, to say things, to innovate with things, we normally give them quite a lot of room in utilizing new tools and testing new tools. And we do it in a way that we basically do the mandatory legal checks that basically we can rather rapidly verify that the minimal legal requirements are fulfilled. Then we start utilizing, exploring with those tools. And at some point in time, normally what's going to happen, we see that this may going to be valuable for the bigger for the whole company, and that's then the moment when it has to be professionalized. And I see the role of IT is basically just to enable that exploration, to make sure that it can be rapidly done, and then supporting those business units if they have discovered something which is great for the company, supporting them to then productize it inside the company, making its operation professional, or potentially also replace it with our own tooling. I mean, for example, in Wolt, we have a lot of our own tooling where we simply don't rely on third parties, and we just build it ourselves. And it's normally it starts with some good ideas which are developed in small tools which are very targeted for the use case, that helps to actually understand, to create a business understanding what is needed, how those processes should work, how things should interact together. And then normally that doesn't change that rapidly anymore. And at that moment it can be productized, can be brought into a product, or we can then just scale the product in use to the whole company.
So is it fair to say that you're kind of having a bit of let's say a walled garden, where, because obviously today you need to look after things like GDPR, I guess with the kind of a working from anywhere environment, the way you described it before, security is quite an important question. So there's a couple of those kind of checks that you need to do, but once that is okay, you basically allow the teams quite a bit of autonomy. Is that a correct understanding?
That's correct, yes. The teams has a lot of autonomy to basically explore, test things, figure out if it works, and then at a certain stage we bring it into the normal product.
Yeah. And how do you see yourself having kind of a role in also spreading best practices? Because when you have teams that are autonomous on the level that's been described, I guess sometimes you will have teams discovering some really things that just work really well for you. Can be both tools, but also basically ways of working. And what's the role for you to make sure that that is kind of being basically spread so that more teams can benefit from that.
I think the role we see us a little bit there is to empower teams to basically do it the way how we intended things to do. We try to empower them and then learn from the teams if they figure out how we can do things even better, basically take that and then bring it into the empowerment of the next teams. And by that, it's basically a continuous journey of empowering, learning from the teams and empowering them again.
Okay, cool. Do you have like internal, I don't know what to call that, but like internal conferences when people are going to be like, hey, we discovered this thing, this is what we're doing. Or because I heard about some other companies, they have like company events, and it's like demo day, teams are like, hey, we developed this little thing that made our life easier, or hey, we bought this tool, or hey, we discovered that this way of doing, let's say, feedback was good. I mean, it can be from very soft to very hard.
And I think that depends really on the team. That's maybe even a bit outside the IT scope, but obviously some of the engineering teams have all kind of ceremonies and celebrations and demo events where new things in tools and ways of working are shared, where people are invited also from outside the company. There is a mass of things going on around basically sharing that know-how, yes.
Okay, cool. I have a final question. I find that in organizations that strive for being, quite flat and having kind of enlightened leaders and just generally being very modern, let's say from a CEO perspective, in those organizations, anything connected to culture tends to be very highly prioritized. And so, going back to the theme here, of this interview, the role of IT in kind of a working from anywhere organization. I mean, how would you say that you are affecting culture and cultural development?
I think first of all, we are part of the culture. That means basically everyone in the IT is an essential part of the culture. And I'm saying essential, it may sound a bit awkward, but if you start as a new employee in a company, IT is one of the units you see very early in that stage. They hand over equipment to you, they hand over the phone, and basically you meet them, you get your user accounts and so on. And that's why we actually spend quite a lot of time with the different teams, like communication teams and the people team, to make sure that we have a very, very smooth onboarding journey where it's not, and that's again super important. IT was the enabler of the onboarding journey, but we as IT, we are maybe not that great in communicating. That means we are not owning the journey. We are basically, we enabled it. We then reached out to the people, to the comms team, and we let them drive the cultural part of the onboarding journey, and for the employee, then it just comes as one flow. He basically gets at the right point in time the questionnaire where he can reply what equipment he wants. Then he gets the information like in one package with what he needs at the first day, where he can pick up his IT equipment, but also other stuff which is like not IT related. It's basically just one onboarding package covering everything, and that gives them, the employee, then this warm welcoming into the organization, which goes along with our culture and enables him basically from the first day to get the understanding that Wolt might be a bit a different company than some other companies.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Adrian. This has been a good talk, and I find it's interesting that you're such a humble person, and I also, you're quite a star within the IT leadership community. So it's I would say that sometimes when you talk to people that are in some other communities and they are a star, they will be less on the humble side, and I think maybe that speaks to your culture, that it's very much like a we, at Wolt, rather than like I. So I think you're probably a very good ambassador for that culture yourself. Thank you so much for this, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
All right, take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I certainly did. If you want to elevate yourself as a modern leader and help your teams become even more successful, then check out Favro Academy at favro.com. There you will find podcasts, webinars, articles, all free of charge. Check it out.